Packers quarterback Jordan Love has seen a massive decrease in his average draft position. We'll tell you if now is the time to buy on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly after you play your first $5. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. On today's show, we're taking a look at three players who have seen a massive decrease in their average draft position ADP over the last month. And we'll tell you if now is the time to buy the dip or to continue to let these players fall. Kate, I want to start with Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers, who is among the biggest fallers at the quarterback position. His average draft position was 51 in the month of October, all the way down to 82 now. He is QB9. Quarterbacks like Kyler Murray, Caleb Williams, and of course, Jaden Daniels have all passed him. Is this the time to buy Love?
I think this feels like kind of a fair price for Love. I'm not going out and trading all of my life away to go buy quote unquote low on Jordan Love. This just kind of feels like a fairly, normal draft price, right? Like, so I'm looking at his season so far. He hasn't had a single game where he hasn't thrown a pick. He's had a very wide range of sort of play. Has looked like reckless Brett Favre at times, and then looks good. And there's it feels like not a whole ton in between there. Even his two top 5 fantasy finishes this year have come on the back of interceptions. Like his first 389 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, but 3 interceptions up against the Minnesota Vikings. Now we know Brian Flores has dialed up some brain busters here for opposing quarterbacks this year. So I'll forgive that one. But his only other game was up against the Arizona Cardinals defense, which hasn't been a great one this year. So there's been a lot of ups and downs. I do think part of what we're seeing, in terms of a lack of rushing upside, like last year, I think we got treated just to more of his mobility in general. Not seeing a ton of that this year, but I do think in part that has to do with the fact that he suffered an MCL injury early on this season. Then we had him exit week 8 early with a groin injury, I believe. We're probably not getting Jordan Love at 100% of Jordan Love capacity.
Probably not. Let's talk about the play first. I think he's been a good NFL quarterback, but it hasn't translated to a ton of fantasy success yet. And again, you're right. The injury could be playing a factor in this, but when it comes to his dynasty value, I'm going to look at it this one of two ways. As a startup quarterback, right, being drafted at QB9, I think that's a fair price. However, I know that if I were in a draft and Jordan Love is available at pick 82, and I'm looking at the other names behind him like CJ Stroud, Justin Herbert, Drake May, Brock Purdy, Trevor Lawrence, Bo Nix, I would be inclined to just wait. Now, I'm not saying I would take those guys over Love, but there's no reason for me to draft Jordan Love at that spot, knowing that the next group of quarterbacks I feel just as good about. So that's my strategy there. In leagues that are already happening, how do you value Love? He's not somebody that I'm going out and targeting right now. I don't want to pay top 10 prices for Jordan Love. I would much rather pay for someone like Trevor Lawrence, who is not playing right now, but I think has the potential to come back and give us that fantasy ceiling. I would much rather trade for Bo Nix right now, who is attached to Sean Payton, and we'll see what that offense looks like. So he's not somebody that I'm actively trading for yet, But maybe if the price continues to come down and we see Stroud and Herbert and May all pass him, then I would be interested.
Yeah, I think it's all about the relative cost here. Now, like, again, I don't want to poo-poo what Jordan Love did in the second half of last season either. Like, he really pulled it together. He's actually averaging a higher touchdown percentage than he did in his first season as a starter this year, which you love to see that. It's really just been the interceptions that have killed him. And again, I think it's just kind of hard to evaluate from a perspective of, like, I just don't think he's fully healthy. But averaging fewer rushing yards per game, 5.75 to 14.5 last year. He just had a little bit more of a safe floor when it comes to that rushing upside. So I love the cast of weapons that he's got around him. I love the ecosystem that he's working with Matt LaFleur. But I do think that, again, like, even though I think it's kind of put under a microscope, the volatile nature of the Jordan Love experience, I still think that's probably closer to what he is on an every time basis, an every game basis, than the hot stretch we saw to close out the season here.
All right, Kay, let's run through some trades recently of Jordan Love, and we got several of them. So let's say that you have Lamar Jackson and you're trying to turn Lamar Jackson into multiple pieces. One of the trades that we've seen over the last couple of days is Lamar Jackson, Superflex League, for Jordan Love, a 2025 first, a 2025 second, and a 2025 third. Is that a deal that you would make?
I don't feel strongly either way. I think that's my problem when I'm looking at Jordan Love things, is I don't have any feelings about Jordan Love.
Okay, so that, to me, that means that you're not trading for him right now. Like, he's not somebody that's getting you excited. So if you're trying to break down Lamar Jackson, maybe you're going to target another quarterback, maybe somebody that's even further down, like a Brock Purdy or a Drake May or a Bo Nix, and try to get a little bit more. So to me, it sounds like you're out on the idea of trading for Jordan Love currently.
Yeah, I think like that's a perfect example. I would rather break him down for a player that I think could offer just as much, maybe is technically being valued lower in the market, like a Brock Purdy. I think Drake May is a great example. Bo Nix, offering probably just as much upside, even if, again, that sort of, there's a mismatch in terms of, like, between a Bo Nix and Jordan Love. Like, there's a mismatch in terms of what we view their ceiling as an NFL quarterback is. But for fantasy, I think the ceiling's probably pretty close, and Bo Nix probably has a higher ceiling because he's just, I think, got a little bit more in the rushing game. So, like,
by the way, I really like Jordan Love. This is not anything to critique him as a player. This is the way I feel about, like, CJ Stroud a little bit as well, who coincidentally is being drafted right next to him. Really good NFL quarterback, but the fantasy asset and the dynasty asset isn't quite the same. He's just not valued as much. I think there are other quarterbacks that are cheaper that offer similar upside, and I would just rather be more aggressive targeting them than Jordan Love right now.
Yep. I think that captures it perfectly.
All right, let's talk about DK Metcalf, who has seen a pretty drastic decrease in his ADP. Kate, it wasn't that long ago. Literally, like a couple of years ago, DK Metcalf was the #1 overall player in dynasty drafts. We'll tell you what his current value is and if you should be trading for him next. This episode is brought to you by Bilt. Listen up, renters. Ever feel like you're stuck in this loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn the rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That is where Bilt Rewards comes in. Bilt is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Bilt points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points toward a flight or a hotel stay with 500 airlines and over 700,000 hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them toward a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. Earn points by by paying your rent right now when you go to joinbilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That is joinbilt.com/LockedOnNFL. And make sure to use our URL so they know that we sent you. Join built.com/LockedOnNFL to start earning points with your rent payments today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more at FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We are looking at 3 players who have seen a massive decrease in their average draft position. Okay, let's talk about DK Metcalf, who is one of the biggest losers coming into the month of November. He had an ADP of 19 overall in October. It's now down to 31. So it's not a huge drop, but a pretty significant one. He is now down to wide receiver 20 in your startup drafts, behind the likes of Rashee Rice, who was injured, Chris Olave, who was injured, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze. Do you agree with this fall?
No, I really don't. So I look at the advanced metrics for DK Metcalf. Everybody knows I love my stats, but I actually think like the metrics feel kind of deceiving for DK Metcalf. This is like definitely not his best season in general. Averaging 15.2 yards per reception. That's the 4th lowest average in his 6-year career here in the NFL. Not having his most efficient season in terms of like yards per route run, etc. But it feels like there's a lot to like about this Ryan Grubb offense in terms of passing volume. It seems like this team is due for some massive, massive positive regression. I have to envision that a lot of this fall is due to more the fact that like he was banged up, he was injured. And then, while he was injured, we had a lot of kind of booms of, some of the rookies. We talked about Brian Thomas Jr.'s meteoric massive rise.
I'm not smart. I just use little words.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we talked about his massive rise in terms of his ADP up to, I think we said wide receiver 7. So I do think some of that is like other wide receivers that are kind of rising, just pushing him down the draft board. But like, let's not forget, before DK Metcalf was injured this year, opened up the year with an absolute stinker, 29 receiving yards, then posted 3 consecutive games of 100+ receiving yards, 2 touchdowns in that span. Like, I feel like the tape and what I'm watching from DK Metcalf feels a lot more exciting than maybe the stats would indicate. I think this is a great spot to buy because, again, you've just got to love the trajectory. You've got to love the willingness to pass in this Ryan Grubb offense, even if it hasn't produced the touchdowns, which I think is kind of like the missing ingredient right now.
Yeah.
And I've been kind of just waiting all season long for some positive regression in that department. It feels like a buy moment.
I'm 100% in agreement with you on this one. I look at some of the names of the receivers being drafted ahead of him, like DJ Moore. DJ Moore's a year older, which doesn't bother me. 26 and 27 is not a big age difference, but I would just prefer DK Metcalf. Even someone like Tyreek Hill, who I really like, who's being drafted 5 spots ahead of DK Metcalf. I mean, you're getting 5 years younger going with DK Metcalf. I would just prefer that as well. So yeah, I think Metcalf is a buy. I don't know how high I would push him up. Would I push him up ahead of like Rashee Rice, Devontae Smith, Chris Olave? If you force me to pick, I probably would say yes. So yeah, I think you're getting a top 15, maybe even top 13 receiver, and you're having to pay wide receiver 20 prices. Like, that's a buy to me. I'd do that all day.
Yeah. And again, I think a lot of this is just kind of the fluctuation of the market. I don't really necessarily know that it's like a product of what people view him to be as much as it is like he wasn't available and other wide receivers were performing in that span. So let's look at some recent trades here. We've got one that actually came in just this morning as we're recording this. DK Metcalf for Brandon Ayuk and a 2025 second round pick.
I take Metcalf all day long.
Metcalf all day long, right?
Not even, yeah.
By
the way,
we've got another one.
On Ayuk, just really quickly, I still believe in Ayuk, but I also believe in Jaywan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall. And that's a pretty major injury that Ayuk's coming off of. Like, I have concerns, like, even next year, not that he's not going to be on the field, but like, what is it going to look like? So yeah, give me Metcalf all day there.
Love that. DK Metcalf for Devonta Smith straight up.
Oh, easily Metcalf, easily.
Same, right? Like,
yeah.
DK Metcalf for Jalen McMillan, a 2026 second round pick and a 2025 third round pick.
I mean, this one's just as easy, right? Like, a 2026 second round pick is the most valuable thing in that trade, and I have to wait 2 years to get it. Give me Metcalf.
This is probably the most, I think, this is, all of these trades have been like DK Metcalf for me. This is probably the one that I have the most like pause about. DK Metcalf for Jonathan Brooks, a 2025 first, 2025 second, and 2025 fourth. I think I might take Brooks' side.
Yeah, because there's multiple ways that you can win that trade, right? If Jonathan Brooks comes back and he's just an absolute animal, and you're getting a first-round pick. No, I'm going to assume that first-round pick is probably going to be lower. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I get that one. I got one more for you, and this one makes me – I know which side I'm picking, but I could also see how I could be wrong. What about DK Metcalf for Ladd McConkey straight up?
Ooh. I think it's hard because it's like – both are great talents. They are just such different wide receivers. Yeah. Such different wide receivers. I don't think there's a wrong way to go for that one, honestly.
I would take Metcalf. Just as much as I love Ladd, I worry about his ability to stay healthy.
I think that's a good tiebreaker.
Yeah. And I got to believe the Chargers are going to continue to try to upgrade their wide receiver spot, whether it's trying to sign T. Higgins in the offseason, drafting someone else. I don't know if we're going to consistently see McConkey get this many targets. So I would take Metcalf, but I could also see how I'd be wrong on that. One last thing I wanted to mention. Let's say you are in a startup draft, Kate, and you get on the board and you're trying to decide between a running back and a wide receiver. Right now, the two players that are being closer, the player that is being drafted the closest next to DK Metcalf is Jonathan Taylor. Would you take, and again, in a startup draft, would you take Jonathan Taylor, RB8, over DK Metcalf, who is being drafted as wide receiver 20?
I ride and die with this theory. I'll take, if there's a close range for me, I'll take the wide receiver every single time. And more longevity. Well. Yeah, more stability. Like the best dynasty rosters I've ever built are built on perennial good wide receivers.
Yeah, I agree. It's close that at least I would talk myself through it, but I think I would lean with Metcalf as well. All right, Kate, let's talk about an old friend, Dalton Kincaid, who I've thrown a lot of money at this offseason and this year. Should we continue to throw good money after bad? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Listen, we all have people in our lives who have helped us in whatever way, right? Maybe helping you get the job that you have now, helping you get through school. I wanted to thank two of my social studies teachers, Mr. Coates and Mr. Bona, who helped really make me love the game of the NFL and really deepen my knowledge of like the NFL draft. Shout out to those teachers. They were absolutely fantastic in middle school. I cannot thank them enough. This month is all about gratitude. And along with the people that I just shouted out, there's another person in my life that I know I don't thank enough, and that's myself. It's sometimes hard to remind ourselves that we are trying our best to make sense of everything. And in this crazy world, that isn't easy. Here's a reminder to send some thanks to the people in your life, including yourself. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's done entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for any reason at no additional charge. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk, available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. All right, Kate, let's talk about Dalton Kincaid. I suppose we have to do it. He is down 18 spots in our startup drafts from 50 down to 68. He has moved from earlier this offseason, tight end 2, tight end 3, all the way down to tight end 7, where George Kittle, Kyle Pitts, TJ Hawkinson have all passed him. Is now the time to buy, or should we continue to wait?
I'm holding. I'm going to be honest, Marcus. We have been like pioneering the train of Dalton Kincaid hype, right? Like we have been all in, and I'm kind of worried. Believe in the talent, huge believer in the talent, but I'm also just wondering if this is kind of like, the direction of the Buffalo Bills offense. Like they're not going to have a Stephon Diggs. They're going to spread the ball out. And maybe it's a Dalton Kincaid game one week, but like there was no better opportunity, I think, than what we had for Dalton Kincaid this year. It's yielded 1 top 5 finish all season long in full PPR scoring formats. Just 3 finishes as a top 12 tight end. Had that 1 week as tight end 5, then tight end 11, tight end 10. Like the ceiling is not there, but he's also had plenty of finishes as like a tight end 3 to tight end 4. Like the floor is not there either. So I think for a player that, he has the draft capital, he has the talent for sure. I just don't know if this is an ecosystem right now that they're building in terms of like what the Bills offense wants to accomplish on offense. Like, I don't know if that's conducive to a ton of value for Dalton Kincaid on an every week basis.
So, I mean, obviously, you know how much I love his talent and I love the situation, right? So I'd like to at least see this through the end of year 3, because it does take tight ends a while to develop. However, I got spooked a little bit this last week when he didn't play against Kansas City, and you didn't notice a drop off at all in this Buffalo offense. Keon Coleman was out, Dalton Kincaid was out. You would figure against one of the league's best defenses, they maybe would have some problems moving the ball through the air. Not at all. Like Dawson Knox looked just as good as Dalton Kincaid. I think he had 40 yards in the game starting for him, which again is not great, but it kind of shows you like they don't need Dalton Kincaid to be a high volume player or even a highly efficient player in order for this offense to work. I'm a little scared. Now, you look at some of the tight ends that are being drafted after him: Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Jake Ferguson, Tucker Kraft, Evan Ingram. And it's like, I don't like any of those guys more from a dynasty perspective, but I don't know that this is the time to go out and buy Dalton Kincaid yet. I think there's a chance. I think there's a chance, Kate, in terms of his startup ADP, where he doesn't move at all as tight end 7, but his average draft position drops from like 68 down to 80, 85, because why take him that high when you can get another player like name a guy in that range. Here, I'll give you some examples. I can get Jordan Addison at that same price tag. Like I just would much rather do that. I can get Brandon Ayuk or Jackson Smith-Njigba at similar spots. I'm just not that excited to go out and get Dalton Kincaid right now.
I think it comes to kind of looking at like value over replacement, right? How much more does Dalton Kincaid offer you right now than
0?
Name a guy. Like
0.
name literally any dude.
I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. A couple weeks ago, when Dalton Kincaid was healthy, I was starting Will Dissly over him and did it pretty comfortably without even thinking twice.
Like, for example, Pat Freiermuth probably offers just as much consistency right now as Dalton Kincaid. That's
I'd rather
terrifying.
I'd rather start the other Steelers tight end.
Darnell Washington is a mammoth of a man, so I don't mind. I don't blame you there. But like I don't know if you're going for ceiling. Like, give me Taysom Hill, right? Give me
honestly,
Jatavian Sanders, who I just traded for in a league. Over the past, 5 games? Tight end 14, tight end 12, tight end 9, tight end 15, tight end 55, smack dab in the middle of that. But like, that's offering me more consistency than Dalton Kincaid's offering. So like, it's about the value of a replacement for me. And if I can get similar production without having to pay up these very costly prices, and I can fill out the rest of my starting lineups with like Jordan Addison and then, name several other players, like I would rather pass and, go see what I can get elsewhere in terms of depth. Maybe draft yourself a K. Dotton, some player that like maybe you don't believe in as much as a talent on the NFL field, but when you look at what they're producing in terms of fantasy scoring, the difference is probably quite marginal, if not in favor of another player.
If you're doing a startup draft, our strategy has always been to load up. If it's a non-super flex draft, load up on receivers earlier in your draft, find running backs in the middle to later rounds. And I'm looking at some of the running backs that are being drafted like behind Dalton Kincaid, and it includes Tyrone Tracy, Chase Brown, David Montgomery. Like, that's the range I want to be drafting 2 or 3 running backs. And if that means I'm passing on Dalton Kincaid, as much as I love him, it's not even a hard decision for me at all.
Yeah, color me nervous. I don't want to be overreactionary because my evaluation of this player was that he's incredibly talented, but sometimes talent isn't necessarily enough to win out if the offensive scheme isn't going to pepper him with targets, or any specific player with targets, right?
Yep.
They're building this offense in a way that I think Stephon Diggs gave them a little bit of a spook. Like, having your entire offense hinge on one player that's not named Josh Allen is a very scary proposition. Right. I think they've probably like overcorrected the course almost, and maybe not for real life because it's working, but for my fantasy teams, they're overreacting here, and I need them to start funneling more targets to Dalton Kincaid. Please and thank you, Mr. Brady.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show, available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Check us out on YouTube as well. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Modjuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. I guess try to enjoy Steelers Browns Thursday Night Football. If you don't want to watch it, it's okay. We'll break it down for you on Friday. We'll see you then.